Why? Because of what Al-Mut'im had done to the Muslims. And the Prophet ﷺ accepted that help, and he gave what recognition he could back to them. So brothers and sisters, the reality is it is high time we have to get over, some of us, not all of us, some of us have this disdain and this arrogance towards each and every person who is not a Muslim around us. The culture we're living in, no doubt, has a lot of evil. No doubt. But there is also much good in it. And that's the reality. Brothers and sisters, for those of you who do have a back home, let me ask you a very blunt question. Think about the situation back home. Think about your extended friends and relatives. Think about your cousins and whoever else you know back there. Look at their mentality. Look at the way they view the world. Look at the way they view religion. Look at their religiosity and spirituality. Ask yourself a very blunt question. Where would you rather have been born and raised? I'm sorry for being so blunt. Some of you might get offended by this question. But this is the reality. I speak for myself. I'm answering myself. And I thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that I was born and raised where I was. Because that gave me the mentality and even the spirituality and religiosity. The percentage of practicing Muslims, of the second generation Western Muslims, is much more than the percentage of Muslims of our age group back home. Islam is a revival, is going through a revival right now. Now I'm not saying that all of them are bad or anything, I'm not saying that. But I'm saying let's get realistic. The percentage of practicing Muslims. And not just that, but look at the mentality of the practicing Muslims and compare them from country to country. So where did this come from? It came from the culture you're living in. Don't be so dismissive and so contemptuous of it. It's very unhealthy, you're living in it. You owe your mentality to this culture. No doubt there's a lot of evil, nobody is saying it's all good. But you know what? Those of you who have lived in other Muslim lands, you will realize that there is no utopia. The evil that you see here, it exists there, and other types of evils as well. It's not as if there's any place on the face of this earth that is free from the evils. There is no Medinan state anymore. There are good people amongst people who are not Muslim, just like there are bad people even amongst the Muslims as well. No doubt the theology of Islam is correct. Nobody is saying that believing that God has a son is a good thing. Nobody is saying that. But I'm saying just because a person believes God has a son doesn't make that person inherently wanting to exterminate Islam and kill you and want to get rid of you. The reality is the mushrikun, some of them wanted to help the Muslims, and they did it. And the Prophet ﷺ took that help. How much more so the Ahl Kitab? And let us not forget that even though we're complaining about much that is happening, the foreign policy of these lands, let us not forget that it was these very people we're living amongst who raised the largest campaign against the wars that their governments are fighting. The largest simultaneous worldwide protest that happened before the first Iraq war a few years ago. Millions of people all over the world. Unprecedented in the history of mankind once again. Such large quantities. Who organized it? Muslims or non-Muslims? For the most part it was non-Muslims. Recently there was the case of Mahir Ar'ar in Canada. Many of you would have heard of this. This person was extradited from America. He was just stopping over, and the American government took him, Canadian citizen, and sent him to Syria. He was ethnically Syrian. And he was tortured in a Syrian jail for years, a year or two. I forgot exactly how long. And when he came back to Canada, he sued his own country, Canada, for not protecting him. He's a Canadian citizen. He took his own government to their courts, their own system. Who won? Overwhelmingly, the public was on his side. The media was supportive of him. He won over $11 million. And a public apology from the Prime Minister of Canada. The Chief Commissioner of the government was forced to resign. The Prime Minister publicly asked America to apologize and to give restitution to Mahir Ar'ar. Why? Why? Whatever their motives might be, the reality is there is the appearance of justice in many cases. Recently, European Union, the Parliament of the European Union has approved a damning report against their own member states. A report that details the secret CIA flights that America would come in and take some people, totally just kidnap them off the street and take them to some governments or some institutions, Allah knows where. And many governments in Europe helped them and aided them. The EU call their own members to task. 13 countries were criticized, including England, Germany, and Italy. Now for those amongst you who are cynical and say, so what? It's just verbal criticism. I say, open your eyes and look at what happens in Muslim lands. If not in all of them, then definitely in the vast majority of them. Where you can get picked off the street merely for criticizing a public figure. Merely for writing a letter to the king, you can get into jail. Merely for praying 5 times a day. I know brothers who were put into jail and tortured just because the secret police monitored them that they prayed 5 times a day in the masjid. Just because of that. Let's get real. There is no utopia anymore, brothers and sisters. There is no land out there that we can look up to and say, this is where we all need to be. No. There is evil and there is good everywhere in the world. Where we are, there is much evil, but there is also much good. I spoke recently with a brother, many of you know him, a mentor of mine, a great figure, who was sentenced to an American jail for a crime he did not commit. A life sentence was handed to him. I visited him in his house when he was under house arrest. And while we were talking, he remarked something which really struck. It really made me think. He smiled at me and he said, you know, I'd rather I get sentenced in an American jail on American soil than in any Muslim country on the face of this earth. This is a person, student of knowledge, great leader, a person we all look up to and respect, but he is telling it like it is. He is telling the reality. I'd rather be in an American jail, on American soil, than anywhere else on the face of this earth. In jail, if I have to go to jail, I'd rather go to an American jail. That's the reality. Let's not, no doubt our countries are doing things in other lands we're against. And we have to try our best through